There's a reason they did this now, and it's not what they said. Look at the iPhone 18 Pro rumors. Really look at them. Bigger battery, heavier phone, a smaller cutout they're refusing to kill, a variable aperture lens that Samsung had 3 years ago, a modem they're finally building themselves, and this one's interesting, a camera button they're already downgrading after one generation. On paper, it's progress. But something feels off. This doesn't feel like the Apple that stunned everyone with Face ID or the M1 chip or even the original Dynamic Island reveal. This feels like a company responding to pressure, not setting the pace. Let me explain what's actually happening here, because if you read between the leaks, you'll see a company that's quietly worried. If you've followed Apple long enough, this roadmap feels familiar, not because it's repetitive, but because it reveals a specific kind of corporate behavior. Apple only moves when it feels threatened or when it sees an opportunity to monetize a shift they didn't create. Let's start with the battery. The iPhone 18 Pro Max is rumored to hit 5,200 milliamperes. That's a jump of about 100 milliamperes over the iPhone 17 Pro Max. And to achieve this, Apple is making the phone thicker and heavier, pushing it to 243 grams. That's heavier than any iPhone ever made. Now, here's what tech enthusiasts will tell you. Apple is finally listening. They're prioritizing battery life, and they're not wrong. But they're missing the psychology. Apple didn't suddenly discover that people want longer battery life. They've known this for years. What changed is competition. Samsung's Ultra series has been hitting 5,000 plus milliamperes since 2022. Chinese manufacturers like OnePlus and Xiaomi have pushed to 6,000 milliamperes. When you're the premium brand and your budget competitors are offering 30% more battery, that's a problem. Not because normal users notice, most don't, but because reviewers notice and reviewers shape perception. Apple isn't leading here. They're playing catch up, and they're doing it by making their phones heavier, something Steve Jobs would have hated. That's not confidence, that's adaptation under pressure. This one's fascinating. The rumors are all over the place. Some say Apple is removing the Dynamic Island entirely. Others say it's shrinking by 35%. Ross Young and Mark Gurman, people with real track records, are saying it'll still be there, just smaller, and that tells you everything. Apple introduced the Dynamic Island in 2022 as a brilliant piece of design theater. Instead of hiding the cutout, they made it a feature. It was clever. It was characteristically Apple. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The Dynamic Island is also a design compromise. It's a solution to a problem Apple couldn't solve: how to put sensors under a screen. 3 years later, Samsung has had under-display cameras on their foldables. Chinese phones have done it. But Apple, they're still debating whether to shrink the island or kill it. The fact that there's even disagreement among insiders suggests Apple's supply chain isn't ready. And that's revealing. Think about it. Apple marketed the Dynamic Island as intentional design genius, and now they might remove it? That's admitting it was always a workaround. The question isn't whether the island shrinks, it's why Apple, the company with the most cash on earth, is still struggling to solve a problem Chinese manufacturers cracked 2 years ago. Here's what normal users care about. They don't even notice the island after a week. Here's what Apple cares about. The island is a visible reminder that they don't control their own screen technology the way they control their chips. That's an insecurity, and insecurities drive decisions. This one slipped under the radar. Buried in these rumors is a detail that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Apple is reportedly using Samsung-made camera sensors for the iPhone 18. Let me explain why this matters. For years, Sony has been Apple's exclusive image sensor supplier. Apple loves exclusivity. They love controlling their supply chain. They love saying things like custom designed and Apple engineered. It's part of the brand mythology. But now they're going to Samsung. Samsung, the company Apple has spent billions marketing against. Samsung, the company they sued for copying the iPhone. Samsung, the company that makes the displays Apple uses, but never mentions in keynotes this isn't just a supply chain decision. This is Apple admitting that Samsung's sensor technology, specifically this new 3-layer PDTR logic sensor, is better than what Sony can offer. That's a public concession, and if you don't think Samsung will mention this in their marketing, you don't understand competitive dynamics. What normal users will hear, iPhone camera gets better. What's actually happening, Apple's pride just took a hit. And when pride takes a hit, companies start making interesting decisions. Speaking of things Samsung had first, variable aperture. The iPhone 18 Pro is rumored to finally get this feature, which allows you to manually adjust the lens opening for different lighting conditions and depth effects. Here's the timeline. Samsung introduced variable aperture on the Galaxy S9 in 2018. That's 8 years ago. Huawei did it. Xiaomi did it. Even some mid-range Chinese phones have had it. Apple, they're getting it in 2026. The tech enthusiast argument is always the same. Apple waits until they can do it right. And there's truth to that. Apple does refine features better than most, but let's be honest about what's happening here. Apple isn't adding variable aperture because they suddenly had a breakthrough. They're adding it because computational photography, Apple's secret weapon, is hitting diminishing returns. You can only software enhance your way so far before physics matters. And once physics matters, you need better hardware. This isn't innovation. This is Apple accepting that they've squeezed everything they can out of software, and now they need to play catch up on hardware that competitors have had for years. That's not the Apple narrative, but it's the reality. This one's embarrassing, and I don't use that word lightly. Apple introduced the camera control button on the iPhone 17. It was supposed to be revolutionary, a capacitive, pressure-sensitive button that could detect swipes, taps, and presses. They gave it a whole segment in their keynote. One generation later, the rumors say Apple is removing the capacitive layer to save costs. The iPhone 18 will have a simplified version with only pressure sensing. Think about that. Apple, the company that keeps features for years, sometimes decades, is already downgrading a feature they just introduced. Why? Because it's very expensive and generating costly after-sales repairs. This is what happens when you design for marketing instead of users. The camera control button was a keynote moment. It was something to demo, but in real-world use, it was a solution to a problem nobody had. And now Apple is quietly walking it back while hoping you don't notice. Normal users won't care. They'll just use the button. But this pattern, introduce, market, heavily, quietly downgrade, it's becoming more common. And it suggests Apple is struggling to find genuinely meaningful hardware innovations. Here's something that sounds boring but isn't. Apple is reportedly moving to a 2-phase release cycle. The iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max drop in September. The regular iPhone 18 and 18e come months later in spring 2027. The official explanation: supply chain management, manufacturing optimization, standard corporate language. But think about what this actually does. It creates 2 iPhone moments per year instead of 1. 2 keynote events, 2 waves of marketing, 2 cycles of media coverage, and most importantly, it creates artificial scarcity and differentiation between pro and non-pro models. This isn't about logistics, this is about psychology. Apple knows that when you release everything at once, you cannibalize your own attention. By spreading releases, you stay in the news cycle longer. You also make the Pro models feel more exclusive by giving them solo spotlight time. It's smart business, but it's also a sign that Apple is thinking more about marketing efficiency than product excitement. The company that used to make you feel like you were witnessing the future is now optimizing quarterly content calendars. Let me take a breath and be fair. Everything I've said, most people won't care. The average iPhone buyer doesn't know what a variable aperture is. They don't know Samsung made their sensor. They don't know the camera control button is being downgraded. They don't know the phone got 3 grams heavier. What they know is this: their current phone is 2 or 3 years old. The battery isn't what it used to be, and the new iPhone has a better camera. That's the decision. That's the entire market reality. Tech enthusiasts live in an echo chamber of specs and comparisons. We debate 35% smaller cutouts and 15% chip improvements. But normal users, they're not comparing the iPhone 18 to the Galaxy S26. They're comparing it to the phone in their pocket right now, and that's Apple's superpower. They don't need to be the best on paper. They need to be good enough that switching feels like effort. The iPhone 18 Pro will be a great phone. It just won't be a bold statement, and maybe that's fine, but it's worth being honest about what it is. So, what does all this mean? Apple isn't in trouble. Let's be clear. They're still the most profitable phone company on earth. Their chips are industry leading. Their ecosystem lock-in is unmatched. Their brand loyalty borders on religious. But they're also showing signs of a company that's playing defense more than offense. The A20 chip on a 2 nanometer process will be impressive, but everyone expects that now. The C2 modem is about independence from Qualcomm, not a feature users will notice. The 5G satellite internet is interesting but limited to Pro models and still speculative. The real story of the iPhone 18 Pro isn't any single feature, it's the pattern. A heavier phone chasing competitors on battery, a camera system catching up on hardware, a display cutout that should have been eliminated, a release strategy optimized for marketing cycles. This isn't decline, but it's also not dominance. It's a company that's very good at iteration, struggling to find the next thing that makes you say, wow. And maybe that's the reality of a mature smartphone market. Maybe the wow moments are gone forever, or maybe, and this is the interesting question, maybe Apple is saving the real innovations for something else entirely, something foldable perhaps, something that doesn't leak this easily. Look, I'm not saying don't buy the iPhone 18 Pro. If you're due for an upgrade, it'll probably be excellent. Apple doesn't make bad phones, but I want you to see the subtext. Every feature has a backstory. Every decision reveals something about competitive pressure, corporate insecurity, or marketing calculation. The companies that once defined the future are now responding to each other more than surprising us. The iPhone 18 Pro isn't just a product. It's a chess move in a game where all the players are copying each other's strategies, and the winners aren't determined by who's most innovative, but by who's most patient. If you found this perspective useful, drop a comment. Tell me if you agree, disagree, or think I'm overanalyzing. I read everything, and if you want more analysis that goes deeper than the headlines, you know what to do. Until next time, peace out.